everyone, and welcome to the Prepdad podcast. It's the fifth episode of the year or sixth episode of the year. First episode in English. Here we talk about nutrition, training, bodybuilding, and everything related to your personal development. I'm Luis. I've got a master in science, and I'll be your host. And today I'm with
Benny Price.
Benny Price, and we're going to talk about everything exercise selection, as I think it's a hot topic in 2025. It was in 2024, and for now the past few years. So first of all, before even introducing the podcast, can you briefly introduce yourself, as I think that a lot of people didn't watch the last podcast we did. I think they should because it was interesting.
Yes.
But could you please introduce yourself really briefly?
So on the last podcast, I had my partner in crime with me, Dr. Slavin, and he was the one that took me from being a person who was just a personal trainer at the time, and I was kind of managing a team of trainers too. And I'd come into personal training having been an engineer beforehand. So I qualified as a mechanical engineer, worked in that side of things for a while, but used to do a lot of coaching, primarily because of my martial arts background. So I was doing a lot of kind of kickboxing training for people, and then that segued into doing some personal training. And then after a while, I just became a little bit disillusioned with the engineering side of things and wanted to follow my passion. So the engineering stuff got left in the past for me. And then 5 or 7 years later, or whatever it would have been by the time that I actually attended the first RTS course myself, that's when Dr. Slavin spends 4 days looking at me, wondering why I was able to put the pieces together so quickly. Very few people are even aware that exercise is essentially engineering. It's at RTS, we define exercise as being internal force production in response to external force application. And if you to understand forces and then understand how they relate to the axes of our joints and the axes of machines and all these components of forces, yeah, there's biology involved, but that's the anatomy of what produces the force.
And that's the end result.
Exactly. Well, then you've got the anatomy adaptations that take place. But the things that are creating stimulus are just different lines of force within us that do different things when we've got joints in different positions and when we've got external force in different directions, right? So very few people have ever even been told this stuff, let alone very few personal trainers, let alone me, who was a personal trainer and had a mechanical engineering background and had never been told that the two things were essentially the same. And so that was an extremely eye-opening moment for me. I think it's hard to say, right? Some of the people in the room, it was really eye-opening because they went, oh my God, I haven't even thought about this physics stuff since I was in high school. For me, it was eye-opening / mind-blowing because suddenly everything started to make sense. And suddenly at RTS, we talk about it like taking the pill in the Matrix, right? Where you never see the world the same again. You now see all the numbers and everything is different. And that's what it was like to me, like that. In English, the expression we use is the penny dropped, right? It's just like the moment, it's the eureka moment. But I can't say it was a eureka moment for me because I didn't discover anything or I didn't think of it. Someone had to tell me it. But then I was able to put 2 and 2 together very quickly. And that's just when everything that I was doing in my career changed very dramatically. The way that I was able to help people, the problems I was able to solve, the way I was able to make exercise so much more efficient. And a lot of the stuff that I got taught at the time with RTS was also how to not just think about exercise as being an exercise selection, if we use that term, right?
Yeah.
As not being, I have a wall of exercises or a list of exercises and I take them and I just use them. But exercise started to become a design process.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah. And so that changed a lot. It changed the type of clientele I could work with and provide value to. And suddenly, where before I was like, oh, if you bring me, an overweight middle-aged person that needs to eat less chocolate and do more squats, I'll be fine, right? I'm pretty confident I'll get them some results. And if you brought me someone that had some issues, maybe I would have at the time thought, yeah, I could have a try. I can see if some things work. But I didn't have any confidence to that. It was just me regurgitating some stuff I'd seen elsewhere. There was no process I had personally where I was going to go, okay, I think I have a means of testing things and knowing what I'm testing and understanding what result I should be looking for, and then progressing whatever I see as being a beneficial outcome from there and seeing if that rolls on, and knowing which variables I should be manipulating to achieve that, and knowing which things could be influencing. And then so suddenly I have this in my mind. And that's what really just kind of changed the way that I ended up dealing with people. And that's now what I essentially teach for RTS. So I came on as an instructor for RTS. I started doing level 1 courses. I now do level 2 courses for us globally as well, because we just launched that in 2024. Before that, you could only do level 2 in the US and the UK. But now that is a global thing for us as well. And you attended one of those? Yeah.
I think that's what you just talked about, like seeing exercises and how do you say regurgitating?
Yes. Yeah.
Damn. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the main issue with social media. We see trainers, they hear about support, stability, and they just try to put those optimal exercise together and say, what's the best?
It's, wow. I mean, I think then it's funny, right? Because it depends on our exposure to it. Maybe you have got exposure to a lot of the trainers that have tried finding some information, right? Or maybe tried watching some reels, whatever they consider finding information. And as a result, you're seeing a lot of people from maybe your perspective regurgitating this stuff. But because of my exposure is very different, right? I'm traveling and teaching a lot of people in countries where they maybe have never even had a certification at all, at any level. Yeah. And so sometimes there's just such a massive gap between what anyone understands in this industry. And some people have never even heard about stability being an influence. Some people think stability is the key to good exercise. They just think less stability is always better, right? They haven't even been given any kind of perspective on what the benefits or detriments might be from more stability and how to use it. And then you've got some people that are just like, the word stability, great, I'm just going to throw that at everything and use that as the defining factor. So there's a huge lack of perspective within the industry in terms of understanding nuance, understanding kind of cost versus benefit of different things, and being able to use that as part of a decision-making process as opposed to just like blah, blah, blah.
And it's also a lack of thinking. That's why I like the t-shirt. It says, what do you say? How to think, not what to think.
Yeah, that's on
and that's the saying. Yeah, that's the one t-shirt. Because I think that's the problem with social media, as people are taught what to think, not how to think. And they don't have the ability. It's like they don't have the ability to learn something and try to put it together. They need someone to put it together for them.
Yeah.
So
you could say it's the problem with social media. You could also argue it's the problem with education.
Yeah, and education.
Right. I mean, when I took my CPT, there was literally a table where it said, you do this assessment, and if they do this, then this is the problem and this is the solution. And there were maybe 8 different things that someone might do when they do. And but the thing was, I think, an overhead squat, hands above your head, feet have to be shoulder width apart, toes pointing forward, do this squat. And if this, then that. And the whole premise or process of personal training with a new client was they walk in the door, they do this thing that not everyone can do. So God knows what the hell you were meant to do if they couldn't do that. Or like if they couldn't, what if they can't even squat?
That's what I was going to say. In fact, the squat is a really advanced exercise.
Let alone with your arms above your head and nothing to counterbalance, right?
Yeah.
So you just get taught that at CPT. And then if we were going very philosophical with it, we could even look at the way school works, right? And maybe it depends on which subjects you're taught. Certain subjects are a bit more qualitative, so you get to kind of talk about something as opposed to just write answers down. And there are the ones the stuff that I really enjoyed in school, and I think this is kind of catered to my mindset. I really enjoyed not studying for exams, especially in like maths, primarily in maths. I really enjoyed not studying for my maths exams, because if you study for the maths exam, you go in and you read it and you just write down the answer that you've almost memorized as being like the way to achieve this answer from this question, right? You're like, oh, I've seen this one before. Yeah, I'm just going to go through this process. And especially in like the younger years of school, when it was still to me quite easy, I really liked going in there and going, what do I know from being in class? And then how would I use that? And by the time you get to like higher level of maths classes, you actually have to do that, right?
Yep.
In advanced maths, they're sitting there going, I've got multiple different methods that I could use to achieve this, which is not going to take me down an alley that I can't kind of find the solution from. And like, I think that process is really fun, is kind of thinking, okay, here are all the ways that I could, again, in English, we say skin the cat, right?
Yeah.
Here are the different ways that I could achieve something. Which one am I going to use? And that's always been fun to me. And I think that's the fun thing about looking at personal training and exercise, right? We're under this illusion that there is a way to do something. And we can even be led to believe by our own success that we found the way to do something. We have someone walk in the room, they have a problem, and then we do some things and we solve the problem. And we go, I found it. There's a huge majority, I would say, of information on social media that is put out there by people that have never worked with anyone. They just solved their own problem. They thought that because this fixed something for them,
Found a new thing.
they found the new thing, and then they go, guys, I found the secret.
But that's the difference between having a set of principles and having methods. And that's the thing. They don't learn the principle, they just learn the methods. And that's, I mean, it just sells better. And that's, we talked a bit about that on the last podcast when we talked about the short and long biceps.
Yeah.
It's a a kind of weird method to sell something. It's, so, and we went from having that functional fitness to hypertrophy machine based, and now trying to have the smartest training out there. And that's we fluctuate between that in like from 2020 to 2025. And it's like now everyone want to have the smartest training out there that they can apply and progress and progressively overload with the best setup, best everything. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. So we're going to talk about...
We're going to do the intro now. Yeah.
This was the introduction. So exercise selection and kind of I would say RTS principle around that. Differences as you work with a lot of general population training, then maybe bodybuilding applications if there is some, and future education for trainer in 2025. But before, because we've been talking about RTS, I think most people don't know what RTS is. What is RTS?
RTS is, to us, it's the defining education for personal trainers. There are a lot of facets involved in maybe being a coach, right? For someone who helps people with all aspects of their health and wellness. But to us, personal training on the gym floor is that hour that you get with that client, where you use exercise as an intervention and almost, I guess, kind of like a prescription. And there's an element, I guess, in doctors' offices where they take things off a shelf but they still measure the dosage, right? It's not just, let's just take as many of these as you can fit in your mouth. And for us, we think the exercise could almost have this element where they're actually formulating you something. And that's the way that we try and give trainers that lens. With RTS, the trademark that Tom Purvis, the founder, owns is client defined. And the whole premise of it is understanding how to tailor exercise to individuals. That individual might be yourself, right? If that's what you're using this for. But it's also meant so that you can use it with as wide a spectrum of people as possible and achieve them the outcome that they're looking for. It combines two key things that certainly until more recently were very, very missing from the industry. Again, like you're saying, some stuff's shifted in the way that people think about things. And now what RTS has been doing since 1997, and Tom Purvis, before he even created RTS, was doing it before that for another 10 years.
Yeah, with NASM.
Yeah, with NASM and the work he did before. What RTS is doing has suddenly become sexy.
Yeah.
All right? It's suddenly become the thing that people are looking for. But I say we, RTS has been doing it for a very long time. And it's this combining physics with what I refer to as being like positional anatomy. So not just what function your muscles perform, but how that function would change depending on different joint positions. And you could understand that. You can understand how to put the joint in the right position to perform a certain motion with certain muscles, and then screw it all up by misapplying the resistance on the other side. So the way that we mold kind of an understanding of forces with what happens when you apply them to the body, that's the kind of the scientific basis to RTS. But then the philosophical, the principle basis to it is several thought processes that Tom Purvis has distilled over the years to create the simplest problem solving and design mindset for trainers to use, where they're able to be as objective as possible about the way that they go about delivering value to clients and helping them figure out what they're there to understand or improve.
And what's the difference? Because you mentioned RTS 1, RTS 2, RTS Mastery.
Yeah.
How many people did you certify with RTS 1? And how many people are RTS Mastery certified?
I asked Tom this the other day. In fact, I think I asked him when I got my RTS Mastery certification. I think there's like 30.
That got the RTS Mastery.
Yeah.
There is an Indu cert. There is, I think, Joe Bennett.
Yes.
Is there Ben Pakulski?
I don't know if he's maintained his since he got it. I'm not sure about this.
And how many people did do the RTS 1?
RTS level 1?
Yeah.
Oh, probably over 1,000 a year.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000 a year.
Yeah.
And how many do you certify out of the 1?
Yeah, probably pretty close to that number. Because the goal with RTS level 1 is really to introduce these concepts and to help people just nail the basics. Like the stuff that you would usually do in the gym with people, how can we make that more efficient? How can we make sure that we're not just giving it to them the way we think it should be done? We're not just going full ROM is better, more ROM is better, as much ROM as possible will make you amazing. We're not just saying, oh, do this as slowly or as quickly or with resistance from this direction or that. Like we're going, okay, what are the variables? Let's introduce the variables and see how different variables are going to affect things, and then see how we might take the most common stuff that you would do and practice adjusting that for different people or for different, I don't know, desired outcomes and efficiency. So that's really what level 1 is. And that's why it's so widespread in certain parts of the world where we've just had a lot of traction over the years. It depends if we've got someone who's a great salesperson or a great instructor in a certain region, then we end up teaching a lot of students there per year. And then there are countries in the world that it's never even been because we haven't ended up
like France.
Like France.
At the moment, but
at the moment.
So because RTS is only in English, you've got a few translators right around the world.
Yes, exactly.
So it's translated in what? In Chinese?
Yeah.
Arabic?
Yes. We also try
in Thai.
Into Hindi. Yeah, we've just spent the weekend with our new Thai translator, who I think he's going through the processes to become an instructor as well. So it will be just dealt exclusively in Thai. We do it in Bahasa as well. So we have a large Indonesian market and following because we have an incredible sales director in Indonesia that manages kind of our presence there. So it's just been about us finding the right partners in the right countries. Yeah. We're not just what I have seen some of in the past is where a certification will just be like, okay, here's the textbook, go and teach some people. And for us, the process of training to become an instructor is pretty long-winded because it's not just about some tables and then telling some students to just copy some tables, right? There's so much of a thought process around it, and there's so much nuance to the way the questions that in a room could be asked that we really need instructors for us, or even salespeople, right? Even someone that's going down the route of helping us tell other people what this is. We really want them to have been through a pretty comprehensive understanding of this and appreciation of this stuff first.
And so it was not there in France yet.
No.
But we're bringing it to France, translated by me.
Yes.
In French, in April.
Exactly.
What are the dates?
I think the dates are currently the 15th to 17th, something like that.
Easter weekend.
Yeah, I think it's Easter weekend.
So we're going to translate RTS in French in Besançon,
Yes.
in the Evolution Training Studio, and we're going to have some fun. So it will be limited to what, 15 people, 15 trainers.
Yeah.
And it's game changer for your education when it comes to in-person or even online training, because I think you can still apply the principles. I think it's a bit more difficult to apply some things when it comes to, let's say, exercise selection, unless you've seen the client sending you videos from multiple angles.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to get in practice.
It is, but I think, for example, the clientele that I work with, where they are really, really broken, and there's some stuff that's really wrong. They're in a lot of pain. They've tried multiple things, and it's no longer just about doing exercise, right? There's so many things that I have to adjust from one rep to the other to end up finding the outcome that it's just really impractical to try and do that online. So when the complexity is high, I don't think online works regardless. You could know everything in the world, and online is still, like, I've tried this. And the times that I've used this online, though, something I've happened to start doing a lot of recently is I will be online while a trainer is with their client in another country. And then I'm there consulting to help with the problem solving process and provide like an external lens, right? They're calling me going, hey man, I've got this client. This is a thing. We've tried doing this over and over. Like I've tried all these things. Nothing's quite worked. Could you dial in for an hour and just help me think about this differently? And that works really well, right? Because I can be the brain and the external perspective, but there's also someone there to help make the adjustments, because the clients don't know what they're doing, right? When you say, oh, could you internally rotate your femur by 10 degrees? They're going, like, do what with my what? And I can't say, well, and that's important, right? Because if I say, well, could you turn your toes 10 degrees inwards? Well, they can turn their toes without the femur rotating. So if I say rotate your thigh, then they might rotate it, but then the fat got dragged along. So then as soon as they relax for a second, it ends up snapping back. Yeah. There's all these things that someone needs to understand that the client isn't going to. And so it's as part of the problem solving process, you kind of need someone there. But if you're an online trainer, I think it's pretty important, because I almost view it as being the same as if you're a group instructor. Right? If you're a group instructor, I think you almost need to be better at this stuff. If you're teaching, 8 people in a strength class or something, and all 8 of them need a slightly different adjustment to make this exercise better, they need a different cue for different people, then you've got to be so sharp. You haven't just got one person and a quiet room and all the time you want to make adjustments. You've got to be able to see things and go, hold on, just maybe do this with your shoulders, or do that with your knees, or make sure your butt goes back a bit, or can you just push your chest up? Like all these little things, you need to be able to do it like that, bang, 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 within the space of 1 minute. And you've got the same thing with online training, I think, where you've got to, if you're not smooth with this stuff, and if you're not able to easily identify and cue and set up and all these elements that create exercise, if you're not good at that, it's going to be really inefficient to be an online trainer, because you can't use your hands. So your mouth and your words have got to be really spot on.
Yeah, and really specific.
Yes.
So you can still apply RTS if you're an online trainer. So we better see you there.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this course, to be honest. Like from what you told me about the French market, the discussions we've had last time.
Yeah.
But I think it's really what means a lot about it for me as well is to be doing it with you. Because of the enthusiasm and dedication and passion you've put into RTS for the past about a year now, right?
A year, because first time it was Dubai, when we were supposed to come to the seminar, which we couldn't attend because we had a flight, but we attended 1 day of RTS 2.
Yeah.
And we liked it. And then I did RTS 1, RTS 2 Singapore.
Yeah.
We just did RTS 1. And every time, even when you redo RTS, you still learn some stuff, even if it's the same level.
Yeah.
Because, you've got different people in the room. So you can learn from even like different execution setup. So that's always interesting. And I'm really, really happy to do that. And that's why I sell my own courses.
Okay.
But, for nutrition and stuff. And I'm happy to kind of being able to translate it for RTS. And looking forward in the next few years what it can lead to before exciting. I get RTS mastery So exercise selection. So the first question, I mean, if you've got like, because you've got principle when it comes to RTS, like how does RTS approach exercise selection? Because I mean, you see some people now when it comes, I mean, and I prefer to talk hypertrophy because that's, people are interested by hypertrophy. Like,
I like it too.
people are like, okay, this exercise, you've got a lot of stability and that's it. And then they're like, okay, that's the best for hypertrophy. That's, I think it became the first thing to look at when it comes to hypertrophy exercise. But when it comes to exercise selection, how do you approach it when it comes to hypertrophy? Is it all about stability or what else?
I guess it really depends on how we're defining stability, right?
Yeah.
And because stability could be, is the seat that I'm sat on wobbly or is it solid? As opposed to, so say I'm doing a row. Am I trying to do a row on a wobbly seat? That's one thing relative to, am I doing a row with or without a chest support? Is there something to help me oppose the resistance? Or am I having to manage that stuff with my hips and spine at the same time? So I think it's a pretty good place to start if the goal is hypertrophy. I don't think there's anything dumb about it. You know, if stuff's less wobbly and if you've got some stuff to help oppose the resistance, if you've got solid things in place that make it more easy to focus on the specific joints that you're trying to target the muscles around and not have to worry about other ones, what we see is that your force output does increase. If the amount that you can row with a chest support is higher than you can row without one.
Yeah.
Which means that the stuff that does the rowing is probably going to see more stimulus.
Yeah.
And if the goal was to stimulate that stuff in hope of some adaptations to come out the other side, then it makes sense to not do that. And then so you've got what, hip extension and spinal extension involved in a row if there's no chest support.
Yeah.
But I've also got other exercises where I could targeted
the spinal flexion extension.
Exactly. I could do an exercise for spinal extension and I can do an exercise for hip extension. And because the thing is, right, I could take the no chest support.
Yeah.
And some people might say, but that's more efficient. Why would I take 3 different exercises for something?
But that's just the issue with a row without support is just you've got just the isometric.
Yeah.
So if you only have isometric, there is, I mean, it's nothing for hypertrophy, truly. Like you need it's really little.
Yeah. It also probably depends on what your current conditioning level is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're like really a beginner, that probably does the work.
Yeah.
Because it was never stimulated before.
Exactly.
If you're an advanced lifter, you probably need some spinal flexion extension.
I mean, no one builds biceps like this, right? It's just not what anyone tries to do.
Yeah.
So why would you do that with your spine?
So you've got stability. What else do you look at when it comes to exercise selection? To target specific muscle.
To target specific muscle, the next element is probably going to be the first thing that's important before we even add the stability in, right? And we go, okay, well, the stability might escalate this, but to target the right muscle in the first place, we need to understand resistance and the direction of the resistance and how that aligns with opposing the muscles on the other side of an axis. So we need to be able to identify the axis of the joint. And then once we can do that, then we're going, okay, well, where are those muscles on that axis? Okay, they're over here, so I need resistance from over here. And once I've got that set up, I'm doing well. The stability is just going to affect how good I am at producing force against that, because it means that I don't have to manage some other stuff. I don't have to, if I'm doing bicep curls, I don't have to manage the position of my glenohumeral axis, right? I can just manage this one. So the first thing I'll go to is the force. I might then look at the stability. And then after that, though, I'm probably going to look at how that force relates to the axis over the course of a rep. This creates what we refer to, the term that Tom Purvis coined, being resistance profile. So the resistance profile is, because if you think about it, right, everything that we have moves in arcs. And so some resistance might be sort of at this level relative to my shoulder when I start a row, but by the time I get to the bottom of it, it has a different relationship. It's a different distance from the joint.
Yeah.
And if that's happened, then the amount of leverage that resistance has over my joint has changed.
Yeah.
And maybe it's gained some
Yeah.
in a row.
And like when you do a pull down like that, that's
Yeah.
even if you've got elbow flexion, maybe it's not that bad because you probably don't have that much tension on your biceps. And that's also that's a mistake I often see in France. People are like, oh, you need to limit like elbow flexion when you've got a pull down just like that to activate more lat and have less biceps, but they don't understand that probably your biceps not going to do much there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it completely depends where the resistance come from.
Yeah.
You could have a lot of elbow flexion, but if the resistance is vertical in this position, I'm challenging triceps. So if we don't understand the resistance stuff, like go home, man. There's no way we can possibly be professional prescribers of exercise, i.e. personal trainers, without understanding resistance, without understanding forces.
And that's the missing part of any certification.
Yeah.
They don't teach that because it's too difficult for some people to understand.
And it shouldn't be, right? The funny...
But they're a bit traumatized by school, you know, I think, where people hate physics.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to learn anymore when they're adults.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens, truly.
Yeah, potentially. On the Bangkok course this weekend, there were 2 students there that they were loving it, man. They were you could just see like the geek in them drooling when they were watching some of the stuff that we were talking about because it was so fun to them. And in the testimonial they gave afterwards, obviously they did it in Thai, so I couldn't quite understand, but they translated it for me and they said, the thing that's so fun is that I learned this stuff in school and they liked it in school. So you get these 2 lenses, right? They loved maths and physics in school. They actually they brought me over and asked me about a piece of equipment using some thought processes that they'd had from high school maths. And they were asking me about a pulley system and they said, so in school we were taught that you've got the first cable and that's T, and then when you have 2 cables, you have T1 and T2. And I'm like, yes, that was what you did when you were like 17 if you took advanced maths. And then, so they were loving this. They were just going, they said, we learned all this in school and I'm so happy that it wasn't a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's so fun to be able to bring that back. But then you get the other people in the class that are going, man, I wish I paid attention in physics. Because when I was taught it in school, it was all about stuff I didn't care about. And so it was boring. And then now you tell them it's arguably the most important thing for them to understand for the thing that they love. Not many people are personal trainers because they don't like it, right? This isn't a job you do if you hate it, just because it's good money, right? 1, it's often not. And 2, most people get into it because they love it. And so you have these people going, man, I wish I'd paid attention because this is now the foundation for the stuff that I'm passionate about.
And what do you say to the people that are going to be watching this and going to be like, oh, but you don't need that. It's too geeky. You cannot apply that in practice. It's like too much thinking, not enough doing.
To the first one, to the fact that you don't need it, I would say they're right. You don't need it.
You don't need.
You don't. Yeah, you don't.
Need.
You don't.
Need is the word.
Yeah, you don't.
It's not because you don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it.
Yeah, but also you don't have to do it. There is no need. You don't have to do it at all to build muscle. Ronnie Coleman got pretty big without it.
Yeah, and
a lot of bodybuilders.
No, and that's what I was going to say. All these guys, most of them.
Yeah, they got huge without it. And people in 2025 are getting massive without it. You don't need it to build muscle. Because if you do anything with a high enough intensity and a high enough frequency and a sufficient amount of protein, you will build muscle.
Yeah.
Literally anything. You could go and become a lumberjack with a 50 kilo axe. And as long as you swing that thing around enough, you'll put on muscle, man. Mm-hmm. The question is, what will be the tax that you pay in the process?
Yeah, longevity wise.
Yeah.
And or can you do more with less? Or or can you do it more optimally, you know? And having a better thinking around it.
Like if you've become a bodybuilder because your goal is to spend as many hours in the gym a week as possible, then maybe don't learn the science. because if things get more efficient, you need less time in the gym. If you become a bodybuilder to get as good results as possible, as efficiently as possible, while beating the crap out of your joints as little as possible, then the science might be useful.
And so that was one of the last questions, but I'm going to put it at first. How do you assess an exercise risk-reward profile within your own framework of thinking?
Ooh. There's so many factors, man. I think
Just give some.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's the positions that are involved. So what positions of what joints are involved in this? Because we know that certain positions make joints a little bit more vulnerable. Certain end ranges, they're maybe not quite as capable of tolerating certain loads. And also so earlier I talked about resistance profiles. You've also got strength profiles. So not just how does the resistance change over the course of a rep, but how does your ability change over the course of the rep?
And even if for that, I think we're not sure about everything and some things are changing, right?
Yeah, Tom does research.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And we were talking about, when was it, yesterday or the day before, about hamstrings, where we were thinking it was like biceps, when in fact it's like muscles.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Strong week.
Yeah, exactly. So some of this stuff is evolving on a daily basis. And Tom has been evolving this stuff for years. Before Tom, it was a man called Arthur Jones who was evolving that stuff for years. And our understanding of what this stuff is adjusting. The concepts and the principles are still pretty solid. And it's all because we understand two things: length tension and internal sort of force angle or moment arm relationships. So when you have those two pieces of the puzzle, you can come to an understanding. Again, this is an understanding that a lot of education, if they're trying to latch onto this stuff, is still missing. There's some pretty popular education out there that thinks that all strength profiles are the same, no matter what you do. And that's kind of insane. So if we've got this resistance profile stuff and we've got the strength profile stuff, and we've got certain positions where we know joints aren't too happy being certainly exposed to either a lot of load in that position or maybe just repetitive loading in that position, that might be a concern. But then also if the resistance is very inappropriate for your strength in that position, that might cause some concerns. So there's just different places, if a spine was fully flexed, I'm not super keen on having it subjected to deadlift kind of loads, right? If I was subjecting it to the kind of loads that I would train that with, that might make sense. But if a shoulder was abducted and externally rotated or abducted and internally rotated, there are certain things that I wouldn't be too keen on. So there are just specific positions, specific amounts of load relative, and then also the direction of the load in that position, right? If I was in this position and the load was in this direction, I'm not too concerned. If the load's in this direction, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And if, for example, if I was doing a tricep extension and the load is in this direction, I'm not too concerned, right? If the load's coming from behind me. But if it's coming sideways, then it's starting to create a suboptimal loading on a joint that can only move in one direction, right? So this is just, there's not really a cut and dry, oh, these are bad and these are good. But these things might cause concern in this direction with this magnitude for this many reps. And then you start, that starts evolving. And it might be more of a risk for some individuals than others, right? Some people might be more sensitive, like less tolerant than others. And as a result, I'm going to be more conservative with the stuff that I would attempt or approach with them than I would with others that I know are pretty bulletproof and don't have to worry so much about it. So it's really a hard thing to put a number behind or a list behind. But does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, goal of this is I want people to rethink about exercise. There is no fixed answers. It's your point of view. It's my point of view. And exercise is, you've got mechanics, and Dr. Slavin loves to say, you can't argue with, and you can't argue with, but we can argue with best exercise. We can argue with optimal. We can argue to risk reward because you don't have a template, a blueprint, a spreadsheet where it's like, oh, for this exercise, it's going to give you those numbers and this is more optimal than that. I mean, you could do it.
Yeah.
You could do your own for yourself, like your own assessment type of thing.
I could do that. And we could have that argument. But then that would make us children.
Yeah, and
It's just not what professionals do. And
yes, that's about being a professional. It's not people. They love doing what's in English. I never know how to pronounce it. Tier lists. You know, the list where you've got like a S rank. Yeah. How do you pronounce that?
a tier list?
Yeah, a tier list.
Or like indexing?
Yeah, where you've got like S, A, the different letters, and you put this exercise there. That's not appropriate when you're a professional.
Well, it's not, because as soon as you have a list of something, that's assuming that the only way to do the things on this list is a certain way.
Yeah.
But it's like if I typed any of those things on that list into YouTube, I see 8 different tutorials for each. So it's like, well, what do any of these things mean?
How many biceps exercises did we say last time? 360 or?
Yeah, something like that. Well, we had 4 times 4 times 3. Yeah, I mean, it was well over 100.
Yeah, you've got like 300 variations for biceps curls. So you better imagine that having that list is not really useful.
Yeah.
And I mean, it may be a great tool to think if you're not stopping there. But some people just watch that and they're like, okay, this is the best. I'm going to do that for all my clients. And that's what we see. But how do you address that concept of, I know you don't like it probably, best exercises? How do you address it? Because we see a lot of content like, oh, my top 3 best exercise for glutes. Mm-hmm. Top 3 based on what? Oh, so what's best exercises?
I mean, how do I... It's very difficult to... I mean, the way I address it when I see a video on it is I scroll to the next one.
Yeah, but people at some point, and even when they do courses, they want answers.
Yeah.
And they don't want to know how to sing. But how can you address that thing when they're like, oh, but okay, we learned that, but what's the best for hamstrings?
Mm. I mean, there are courses that will try and tell you that, so they can go to that course if they want.
Yeah.
Like, it's honestly, the reason why it says how to think, not what to think on my back, is this is not the course if you want to be told what to think.
Yeah.
If you just want to be spoon-fed something, and then if you want to wait until the next person that comes along that is confident and tells you something different is, and you go, okay, sir, and you just now take that as being the gospel, I mean, honestly, they would be in the wrong place if they were in the room with us. And the point of this is to be able to have an independent thought process, to be able to be objective and analytical about anything that anyone might say, and to not be able to create the best, but to be able to create the most suitable, the most appropriate, and hopefully also the most efficient means of achieving the intended outcome for that individual, with the tools that are available, with the time that's available, with the coordination that they have available, and the joint ranges they have available, and the force output they have available, and all of these variables that are going to dictate what this person brings to the table and what you've got as tools to achieve something with them. How do we find the best for that person on this day with my stuff? And then what's pretty fundamental to the RCS thought process is to still not be stood there patting myself on the back, you know, saying, wow, I've created the best. No, I will still, in the scenarios where I'm stood back looking at something going, okay, that was really complicated. They were a pain in the ass to figure this out for, but I mean that in a good way, right? Because otherwise I would be bored. And I've done it, and that looks really cool. And I've not seen this before. I'm not stood there going, well done me, I'm amazing, someone give me an award. I'm stood there going, and this is something I've learned from Tom Purvis, going, yeah, okay, but what could I do better? Is there a way I could improve this? How's this gonna work next time if they come to me and something's changed? And that mentality is what I think I've also seen you get really geeky about while you're taking the course, right? And I think I think this happens to people that aren't just looking for someone to give them a spoonful of food, right? And just be like, okay, you're done. You start going, oh, this is fun. This is interesting. This is going to change every time a little bit, and I'm going to change with it.
Yeah. And so we've got that. We've got the best exercise. And what are the criteria beyond just compound exercise, isolation exercise? Because people tend to oppose them and like, oh, compounds first, isolation second. Compounds are better for hypertrophy. Isolation are finishers. And I mean, still in 2025, we've got that. But exercise is just exercise. And there is one, you've got one joint, the other one, you've got multiple joints.
Yeah. So so there immediately, right, you're highlighting a more professional way to play spot the difference.
Yeah.
Right. How many joints are actually involved? And if we're not just thinking about how many joints are involved, but then you brought up the stability thing earlier, right? And a lot of the time, an isolation exercise might involve more support to allow you to isolate that joint by securing the other joints so that they don't have to be managed. And so that's, if you start combining those two, and then the other thing you could probably do is start limiting the resistance. If you think about, you could provide plenty of support and you could reduce the number of joints, but if the resistance is still something like a dumbbell, that's got lots of variability to the way that it could be moved over the course of doing a rep. And that might be fine for someone who's very coordinated and very experienced in the gym, right? That might work absolutely fine for them, but then for some of my new clients, it's not really a thing, right? Because every rep's going to look different. And only one of them might be the one that I was actually trying to achieve, the path that I was going to try and get them to move through. So we've got, and also the funny thing about bodybuilding and training hard is that when things get really, really tough, it's almost like everyone becomes a beginner, right? When you are 2 reps from actual failure, when you think your eyes are going to fall out of your head, the control that you had on that first rep starts to float out the window, right? And we go back to having the coordination of this beginner, and we go back to having to focus as hard as a beginner has to
be able to control.
Exactly. So the same way that we might design an exercise for a beginner where we're manipulating the stability and the number of joints being moved and maybe the guidance being provided by the resistance, that's why that approach might also be the same thing that we would do for the most advanced person who's trying to train as hard as possible. So there's also not a best exercise for these people or those people, because the thing that was the best for them, they might go away from, but then it might end up being the most suitable for them when they've gone full circle and ended up in a different part of their training career. So it really just depends on who they are and what we're trying to achieve with them. And I think if we're talking the best, and if we're reframing it for the word that we use at RTS, which is appropriate, and it's in the trademarked exercise equation, and appropriateness is the defining factor of exercise, right? It takes something from being the best to being really, really stupid, is if it's being applied to the wrong person for the wrong
And
goal.
appropriate is individual dependent. It's not,
But so if we're looking at appropriateness, I think you could define something being inappropriate or appropriate, right? If someone was doing an exercise with an individual, and we looked at that and we looked at what the individual was capable of, and we looked at what the individual was trying to achieve, and they didn't match, you could say that is the worst, the least appropriate thing for that person with that goal. And so there are ways that you could essentially look at this definitively, but even then there's this blurred line of like, okay, well, that's your professional perspective and this is mine. So there's a little bit of gray in there. But at the same time, there is just stuff that is inappropriate. Regardless, like you might try and justify it a certain way, but your justification can be poor or wrong. So it's not that there is no such thing, but it's like you say, it's got to be individual specific. It's got to be client defined in order for it to make sense.
And so what are the must avoid exercises? Same.
Ooh,
No, but
I think you could probably come up with some things that
maybe it's, yes, that's what I was going to say. Maybe it's easier.
The funny thing is, I think for the most part, you could look at completely vertical pushing and pulling. Vertical frontal plane pushing and pulling. So attempting to push like this or pull like this, and attempting to push and pull like this. They wouldn't be must-avoid exercises, but they are the ones where the benefits from them can almost always be achieved with something else. And they hold potential.
With less constraint on the joints.
Exactly. And less potential long-term detrimental influences on the joints.
Like the around the world races. Have you seen that?
Yeah, again, it's frontal plane, right?
Yeah.
It's frontal plane and it's the vertical stuff. But it's not quite as bad.
But it's so hard to control.
Yeah. Well,
But it's going to put so much stress on the biceps too. When you're there and you try to control down at that point, it's going to be really hard.
the funny thing is as well, it's not just frontal plane like these would be, but now we've changed the resistance to be not down and up, but forward and back, right?
In full range of motion.
Yes, exactly. So there's a potential problem with doing those. So I think that's the first place that you would start in terms of saying, okay, these aren't must avoid. Like, you can do them if you want, and there are probably plenty of people out there that have done them for their whole careers and been fine. But it probably wasn't the most efficient way to achieve the stimulus they were looking for, and they got lucky. They got genetically lucky that they were tolerant to this, and there are going to be plenty of people that aren't. And the only way for them to have found that out was to hurt themselves. And so if you're asking me, I don't feel like, particularly if I'm operating as a professional here, right? Particularly as if I'm giving this to someone else, I'm not going to do the stuff that they may or may not be tolerant of. And the only way to find out is if they get hurt. Because if they get hurt, that's on me, man. And that's not what they employed me with trust. They trusted me to be the person that would get them the good stuff without the bad stuff. And I flirted with the bad stuff because I liked the exercise. They were part of my exercise religion. I don't know. There was what other reason could I have for choosing stuff that has a illogical cost to benefit relationship relative to other stuff?
I think that answers the question. And last question about just exercise selection.
Yeah.
What's your take on the role of machine versus free weights? Because we went from, machines are bad to machines are the best in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, what's the reasoning? Do you think people have? Because, I mean, people don't understand. I mean,
I would say you probably came up with the reasoning, right? When you said that the trend has been towards stability.
Yeah.
So the people that.
But is it the only thing? Because if you've got a machine like a lat pull down where it's doing like an abduction, is it optimal? You know?
Yeah. So I mean, machines versus free weights. And again, I couldn't care any less about what the studies have shown, because
actually they've shown no differences.
Yeah, exactly, which is why I don't care about them.
Yeah.
Because of course, the way you watch most people execute exercise, and I don't mean this offensively, but I'm even talking about people that think that this is their job. The way that you watch them execute exercise, I don't think it matters what they use, because it is so poorly controlled, it is so inconsistent, it is so inertia driven that I'm not expecting to see much difference between the two. But I think if we take that perspective we looked at earlier, right, where we talked about the number of joints that are involved and the amount of support that you're receiving and the guidance from the resistance as being this thing that makes it easier for beginners, but also easier for advanced people to really push themselves, I think that might be where you're going to see a difference, right? If you took, and the problem is, right, how the hell are we going to measure this with advanced people? Because advanced people put on like a gram of muscle a year. So but that would be where we might start seeing differences, right? Is where you start going, okay, for beginners we might see a difference, but for beginners you can't really push them that hard. So the main thing with the beginner is just that it's not a mess, right? And that they actually feel confident doing the thing, and it's safe to do the thing because they're not going to like drop a dumbbell backwards and tear their shoulder up. So the beginner reasoning for doing it is probably confidence and safety. But then when you get to the big boys, the big leagues, the people that are really trying to put on a lot of muscle and already have plenty of it, they need, from what I understand from the science, they need to push pretty hard. You can't leave 3 reps in reserve on a couple of sets a week and hope to build muscle once you've already built a lot of it. You've got to train pretty hard, unless you just want to do 50 sets a week of stuff. But if you want to be relatively efficient with your time, you've got to train pretty hard. If you want to train pretty hard, you need stuff to stay pretty consistent. And you need to be able to maximize that force output and not have your brain down-regulate things because things are wobbly. And because when you're tired and things are wobbly, you know what I mean? When you lose control, because your output is really diminished, and the stuff that was previously helping manage your joints is also really fatigued. So you're running out of, say you're pushing, right? You're running out of the stuff that was handling this, and you're like, okay, I've got to stop. Well, maybe you didn't have to stop, right? Maybe if all you had to worry about was pushing, you'd have been fine. Maybe you could have got another rep out. Maybe that would have resulted in more gains. I don't know. But my inclination would be that provided the machine is designed well.
Oh, and that's not given.
Oh my God, it's not even close to being given. It's a rarity.
Yeah.
Right? Provided the machine has been, and this is where we're going, okay, well, provided the path of the machine is matching the path that the individual's joints is probably going to go through, right? It's not like arcing this way when you're arcing this way. Provided the resistance, or provided the machine is adjustable enough as well to allow yourself to match those paths to the individual. And then provided the resistance is appropriate at the different portions of the rep where your strength shows different quantities, then yeah, we could probably start to get there. Because sometimes the profiles built into machines are less appropriate than the ones that we would have got if we just use a cable. We looked at some of these this weekend, right? Where we went, this is great for this because it allows us a really stable environment and someone doesn't have to worry about this and that. But if the goal was tax them, provide them with maximum challenge and consistency of challenge throughout the entire rep, so that one part isn't really difficult and one part isn't really light. And as a result, the bit that's light is just essentially arguably a waste of time, right? It's just a complete lack of stimulus where someone might need it. Then we might actually have been better off at the cables or the dumbbell. We just needed to maybe design that slightly differently, because the relationships between the axis of our joints and that resistance is not always ideal in the standard textbook way that you might have done this based on, I don't know, what you saw in 80s bodybuilding videos. So there's some stuff to play with there, but I don't think the fact that it is a machine or the fact that it is a free weight, what are those? But because the cables count as free weights.
Cables count as cables.
Cables count as cables. They're in their own category.
I think people would categorize them in machines.
Okay.
You've got, let's say you've got dumbbells, barbells, and then you've got machines and cables.
We could call cables like oppressed weights. Like they're not free. They're not free.
Yeah,
they don't have the liberty of going anywhere in the gym, but they're a bit more free
than machines.
Than the prisoners that are machines that can't go anywhere.
Even if machines have cables.
Yeah.
Then it becomes an entire new discussion.
Oh God. Yeah, like what is a lat pull down? Because it's technically a cable.
It's cable, but right. At the same time, it's on the machine.
Yeah, but it's disguised as a machine.
See, but that shows that there is no point at even having the discussion around machines and free weights.
No, I don't.
Because if the machines doesn't have the right design, yes, you can do better with free weight, especially for biceps, triceps. Do you know a lot of machines for biceps and triceps that are that good? No. And that match what we want?
No.
And for biceps, it's pretty easy to do that with dumbbells.
Yeah, and cables.
And cables.
if I was building a gym, one of the last things I'd buy would be biceps.
Biceps, triceps.
Certainly a biceps machine. Like a well-designed tricep one, potentially. But even then,
Which one are you thinking about?
I can't think of a modern one. I genuinely can't think of a modern one. I might go for like some of the old school ones, but even then, no. In fact, I don't think there is one on the market. The problem is, Tom has one in his gym that he has cut apart and put back together and attached new pieces to and everything, and it is glorious. And you can never go back. Once you've used that thing, using every other tricep machine after that is irritating because of how poor they are at achieving
suboptimal.
Exactly. I mean, there's just the support's in the wrong place and the profile's not ideal and the path is restricted and all these things that his one piece of equipment fixes, and suddenly like, oh, this is what it could be.
Uh-huh. And so let's talk about training the general population.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when I say that, it's just like, let's say people that want hypertrophy without doing bodybuilding, which we may categorize as a bit different. They want to be functional and healthy and have a nice body, but they want to build muscle.
Yeah.
Like, what was the first? What was the question I had? I don't remember. How do you tailor exercise selection and programming for someone new to trainings versus someone with years of experience for general population? Like, what would be the main differences that you see in the gym?
Intensity.
Yeah.
That's
not exercise selection may be the same actually, even for a beginner.
Yeah.
But you would
progress earlier, right? The way the thing that's perfect for the beginner is often perfect for the bodybuilder. The question is just how high did I turn the volume?
Yeah.
Right.
And if you've got a client, let's say most general population are going to come to you, they've got some pains. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what you may see. How do you differentiate between pain that's okay and pain that signals a problem during exercise?
There is no pain that's okay. I do not have any, if there is a 1 out of 10 pain, that's enough for me to say, okay, what are you going to do something else? And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, it's just legal, man. If someone has said to me, this hurts, and anything goes wrong, and we're in the court, and they say, I told him it hurts, and he did it anyway, and they go, did she tell you it hurts and you did it anyway?
You lie.
Yeah, okay, well, that's my other option, right? No, she didn't say anything. There's cameras in my gym, so I'm going to struggle with that one. Or, yeah, I mean, I'm going to be stuck. There's no excuse for someone saying this hurts and me doing it anyway. And the ridiculousness of it, the ego of it, to me is...
No.
And again, I say this is pathetic, but this is a new perspective, right? When I say this is pathetic, I'm talking about my old self who used to maybe have some leeway on this. I used to be like, yeah, it's okay. Let's just try a bit more and stuff like that. And now I'm going, man, there was a time where I thought that my brain connected to my nervous system knew more about what was wrong with this person than their brain connected to theirs. Yeah. And I went, no, your brain's stupid. Listen to mine. Because it thinks it knows better. That's crazy to me that I ever used to have that approach. And so...
Oh, you used to have it?
Yeah, I mean,
everyone, I think.
Yeah, dude, we could do an entire podcast on the dumb shit I used to do with clients that I look back on and think is appalling and embarrassing. Some of it I've probably erased from my mind so that I don't have to think about it. But that perspective now means that there's nothing that's excusable. But then the other side of it as well is that I've never found pain that I can't redesign exercise around. So why would I keep doing the thing that they're currently saying is causing them pain when I know, I'm fully confident that I understand enough of the variables and how to adjust them that I could find a thing that wouldn't hurt. Mm. And if this thing currently hurts, maybe I don't need to do it in a different way. Maybe I don't need to go and do some other things that would contribute to improving how this thing feels. I really like it when my clients have pain, because pain makes my job really easy. Because pain is like a guiding star. It's now I've got a metric. Now I've got a thing where I've got a problem to solve. And if pain presents doing one thing, I can go and do other things, and that's going to tell me if I'm doing a good job. Because if there's pain, if I come back and I test and it still hurts, okay, those things that I was trying weren't a good idea. They weren't helping. If I did something else, then came back and this thing didn't hurt, now I know, okay, this, even if it hurts slightly less, this must be influencing. Excuse me. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be a bunch of other things that could also have been even better. Right? I'm not going to stop here. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier. We're not resting on your laurels, right? Not going, wow, I'm amazing. I did something great. Okay, this must be the secret. There could have been plenty of others that I was missing. I'm still going to keep hunting for them. But yeah, now that I've figured out a way that could influence this, and maybe this will fix it for now or address it for now, and I'll make this much progress, and then it'll stop doing anything, and I'll need to go and do maybe one of the things that didn't help in the beginning. I'm constantly with this process. So I don't think that there's any amount of pain that is acceptable in a personal training surrounding. I don't think there's any amount of pain that people should be pushing through. Like if you've got pain doing something, go and you don't know how to address it, go and see someone that does. But the other thing that I think is interesting about this that you got me thinking about is when you said what's the difference between a general population and a bodybuilding exercise selection process.
Yeah.
And now we started talking about pain, and so pain gets people thinking about rehab. The crazy thing to me is that I see bodybuilding and rehab as being the same thing. Bodybuilding is just way more intense. But if we think about what defines them, rehab, I'm looking for, I mean, unless I've torn a muscle and that thing just needs to maybe heal and get used to contracting again, I've got a joint and I've got some stuff surrounding a joint, and I basically want to get as much stimulus to the good stuff as possible while not damaging the joint. Maybe it's already damaged and it needs to recover. Maybe part of that recovery is to get it moving again. Maybe there's some stuff, some muscles around that aren't really doing their job. So, but I'm, regardless of what is happening, I'm looking to achieve as much good stuff as possible with as little bad stuff as possible. That is rehab. That is what goes into my design process. And a lot of the time, if I'm trying to rehab this joint, I'll put support and stability in place so that my client can focus on using this joint and not have to worry about those other ones. Let's go to bodybuilding. Bodybuilding. I'm going to do a shitload of this stuff, man. I'm training this stuff very intensely quite a few times a week. I cannot afford the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I'm doing 6 reps for 2 sets. I'm doing God knows how many reps with a lot of load. So more load as a ratio is going to, if the bad stuff is 10% of 100 or 10% of 400, that's more and more bad stuff. So I need this bad stuff that like efficiency level to be as good as possible.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to grow some things in the process, right? So I want as much stimulus to the good stuff as possible. And I don't want the person doing these exercises to have to worry about all the other crap and managing it. So I'm going to put support and stability in. And next thing you know, you've got essentially the same intentions and the same thought processes for designing a rehab exercise or a bodybuilding exercise. It comes back to the general population thing where I'm going, really, it just depends on how intensely they're going to do it and how many compounds they're taking in between. And that's the difference between someone doing rehab and someone doing competitive bodybuilding.
And so for bodybuilding, how do you balance the focus on hypertrophy with joint health and longevity in mind?
It's just application of resistance, really.
Yeah. So it's better thinking around exercise selection.
And design.
And design.
Like you could say resistance selection. Right? Because the manner in which that resistance is being applied to the lever, the thing that's holding it, then that affects the manner in which it relates to the joint. And as long as that aligns with what the joint is comfortable with doing and is built for, like structurally, then we're probably in it. That's a good start. The other thing as well is progression, right? Is for me to make sure that whatever I'm doing, we're adaptable. And if we're going to start loading things, we might want to load them gradually so that the stuff inside us has time to adapt. And maybe, I guess, depending on on what we're doing with some of the internal systems and some of our hormones, sometimes we could have the muscle stuff adapt quicker than the joint stuff, right? Because the muscles are adapting very, very, very quickly because we've enhanced that process. So that's one of the ways that I think bodybuilders could sometimes get caught out, is they're led to believe that they can progress quicker than they can because their strength is progressing quickly. But that doesn't mean their joints have had enough time to catch up with that process.
And so let's say we try to optimize resistance. And how do you reply to the people that say like, oh, when you reverse band, let's say a squat, oh, but we want to be strong everywhere. So it's not needed. Yes, it's not needed.
It's not, yeah, but that's what this is doing, right? This is improving. If you have X amount of force production ability at the bottom of a squat, and you've got X plus X times 1.4, 1.6, whatever it is, at the top of a squat, why would you then only choose X weight and have such a large portion of your squat be sub-maximally challenged? If we thought about the number, what I'm trying to do with my joints, and this is the reason why, and I'm just going to throw this out there, I don't have a hard stance on it. I'm not interested in really saying that I'm on one team or the other about it. But when people have the discussion about volume versus intensity,
Yeah.
I don't see the volume argument being the one for longevity. Because say I can squat, right? Say I can squat 100 kg. And say I can do that for 10 reps, whatever, right? We're just choosing arbitrary numbers. If I could only do, if I was going to stop 2 reps from failure because my goal was volume, I'm going to do 8. And then I'm going to do 8. And then I'm going to do 8. And then I'm going to do 8. And say it took me 3 sets, right? That's 24. If, hypothetically, I could achieve the same gains by increasing intensity, and I could actually do 10 on both sets, and I'm equally fried, that only took me doing an extra 2 reps of 100, right? So I did 2 times 100, 2 times 100, I did an extra 4x 100. But with the other one, I had to do 24 reps, not 20. So I've added another 4 times 100.
On your joints.
On my joints. I don't care about muscles, man.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, it's not about muscle.
It's not about muscle. Anything gives me muscle. We've proven this. People that have been getting massive forever have not been arguing about volume versus intensity. And honestly, I have to wonder, you know, when you were talking about at the beginning, that now the trend, now the focus is, can I have the most scientific program? Is it, or is it, can I sound as clever as possible on video?
Oh, I think the second answer.
Because is that the real motivator here? Because if people genuinely believe that being super scientific about this stuff is going to change how jacked they get, how the hell did everyone get so jacked?
Yeah.
They weren't, man. They were just eating some chicken and going to the gym and training pretty hard.
Yeah, and training hard.
Yeah. And then and that comes back to, are we letting ourselves get distracted? Are we getting too distracted by trying to be as scientifically correct as possible? Are we getting too distracted by volume studies that we've stopped actually training hard during our sets? Like, are we losing intensity because we're trying to be too scientific? And the beauty of using appropriate resistance to make sure I actually answer your question. And banding a squat, for example, or a leg press, or a multi-joint leg exercise, banding something like that allows me to scale the intensity, because now it's not just difficult 10, 15% of the rep. Now every piece of that rep is more difficult. And as a result, hopefully, I need fewer reps to hit failure, to hit what appears to be the thing that creates the adaptation, right? Taking your body to the end of its ability. And I don't need drop sets because I'm dead. I don't need any extra stimulus because I've tailored the resistance to make sure that everything is 100% exhausted by the time I've finished a set. There's no bits of the range left, right? I've filled in all the gaps. And I don't need other exercises to achieve it as well, right? If we look at the reason why people feel the need to do 6 different back exercises during a workout, it's probably because a lot of back exercises are really poorly designed from a stimulus perspective. They're only stimulating for a very tiny portion of the rep. And so you've got to do lots of different exercises to fill in all these different portions that we're not getting stimulated through. And if actually we had better exercise options or design abilities, we might need fewer of them in order to achieve the same stimulus through the same range of contractile lengths.
That answers the question.
There we go. I got there eventually. Sorry, I did a little.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
It helps people to think. And let's talk about continuing education.
Okay.
Like, how do you stay up to date with the latest best practices and research? Because people care about, I mean, first of all, what's your take on research when it comes to training hypertrophy? And do you read research and use it in your daily practice?
I don't use it in my daily practice, but I am actually a researcher. I should say this more often, but I carry out a lot of my own research. I would argue that I might even carry out more research than some of the researchers, because I do it every day.
With clients.
And I do it with up to 8 to 10 people in a day. I do it on all my clients. And the beauty of my research is I control all the variables, because I've only got one person. And from one session to the next, I'm manipulating one variable at a time. I'm never having them come in and last week there was X support and X amount of guidance with the resistance, and they were using X number of joints and stuff, and the resistance was from a certain direction. I'm never coming in and going, hey, you know what we did last week? Yeah, this one's completely different. Let's see what the outcome is. No, I'm keeping all of the variables in check. So I constantly do research, but I do research on the only people that matter to me, the people that are my client. And I do research on the only people whose results are relevant to my clients, that the results I've achieved with them, the outcomes I've achieved with them, are the only outcomes that are possibly relevant to them and are going to be relevant to my decision-making process with them moving forwards. What some other people got doing some other stuff in a way that I have no idea how they executed it has no relevance to this person, this day, and what I'm going to do with them. And so I sometimes read the research, but it's primarily because students of mine are asking me, hey, what about this and what about that? And sometimes with teaching, right, you get people asking the same stuff all the time that you go, okay, I mainly read research so that I can identify all the holes in the research and then go, okay, well, have you considered this? And then they go, oh, yeah, okay, sorry, never mind then, right? And sometimes I read a lot of nutrition research.
Yeah, I was gonna say nutrition research is important.
It's completely different.
It's different because what you're gonna learn about hypertrophy training? Okay, maybe you should do 10 to 15 reps instead of 8 to 12. Yeah, good, but you're still gonna gain muscle with 10 to 15. Well, it's not going to change much because, the thing is, you can't argue with mechanics, and it's mostly mechanics, what we're doing.
And like the number of reps that you did, that, like, for your client, they might get pain after X number of reps, right? When the joint's been through that. So you might have to do fewer reps. Equally, they might get pain with too much load, so you might have to do more reps.
The only thing that we may be interested in is strength profiles.
Yeah. And that research we're doing at the moment, and you need to do multiple individuals, right? But all that the multiple individuals are showing us is that there's not a difference between different people in strength profiles. So the main reason for that is to make sure that the data that comes out is actually consistent and we're not having to account for crazy variance in individuals. But there's a big difference with nutrition research, right? Because nutrition, with exercise, we take our understanding of how this stuff inside works and how the stuff that we put into it, apply to it, the relationship between those things, and we go, okay, well, when I do that, this stuff definitely contracts. And if this stuff doesn't contract, then there's something wrong with the circuitry. But the massive difference with nutrition is that we have theoretical biochemical understandings of, if I take this thing and I put it in the human body, well, it should go along this pathway and create this outcome. But then we do that, and so often it doesn't happen, right? So often there's this theoretical thing that you could give someone and it should do this. But then for some reason, your body just shits it out, or it just can only use so much of it at a time or something, right? And we thought we have this thing with the human body where we think more is always better. And then it just doesn't work like that with nutrition. And I think it's almost, the hilarious thing about nutrition is the studies are almost more important than the science. Because the studies show what actually happened, whereas the science is purely theoretical.
And some people use the science instead of the studies, but they should use the studies.
Yeah.
Because it's not because you've got that biochemical thing that happens into your body that is going to translate into something you can apply into practice.
Yeah. But the irony
that's the issue with mechanistic arguments in nutrition.
Yes.
If they use mechanistic data, it's not leading anywhere. But in training, it's way harder to use research. That's why research is way less important.
I would argue it's literally the opposite way around.
And that's and then the trainers that watch this need to understand you don't need to know how to read research. And I think some courses focus on that. I think that's not the right thing to do. They should focus on mechanics.
I genuinely do not use a single research study on a daily basis. Well, and I work with some pretty high-level bodybuilders, as well as some broken people, because a lot of high-level bodybuilders are broken. And a lot of high-level bodybuilders need to be very specific with their design of exercise, because there is a very like everything's grown, but this one stubborn thing is struggling. And then the more other stuff grows, the more it starts taking over the job, right? And that other thing gets left behind. So they need to be really specific. So I've worked with those people plenty, and never have I used a single research study.
And you're not going to tell them, but you got to do that because et al. Said that you need to do it. No one says that. No. But in nutrition, it may be interesting if someone asks you, but you're sure I can consume that much protein? You can be like, yeah, you can, and it's backed up by that. In training, you cannot be like, you do 10 to 15 reps. It's backed up by that. No one says that.
I mean,
no one cares.
I was on a panel recently, and one of the people in the crowd asked the panelists what has shown up in research that has defined how they work with their clients. And one person said that they came up with only two things that the researchers actually said that it affects how they work with people. Firstly, that more volume can get you more gains. Like, how is that revelatory? How are we amazed by the fact that more can get you more? But more can get you more up until the point at which it doesn't. And the research doesn't tell us anything about where that point is, because that point is completely related to intensity and the individual.
And it relates to individual. As we know that maybe there is some gender differences when it comes to recovery. We know that, and maybe other stuff.
So the first most important thing that research has told us about training is that more gets you more until it doesn't, and where that thing is, we have no idea. It just depends on the person. Okay, so progression then, right? And then progress people and look for signs that progression is no longer beneficial, and then find something else and a different way to progress. I didn't need research for that. That's the premise of progression is the premise of personal training. So, and it's the premise of the thought process that we teach at RTS. So I didn't need that. Okay. And then the other one was that any number of reps, as long as you go with sufficient intensity, yields hypertrophy. Cool, bro. I mean ask any of the old boys, right? Any of the bodybuilders, they would.
But maybe 5 to 20, because then, over 20, it's hard to quantify.
Exactly, and
but the thing is, you don't need anyone to tell you that.
You don't need anyone to tell you that, and it's not just the quantification, right? It's the 5 to 20. But I don't have any clients. Occasionally I will have someone that needs to operate in the 20 to 25 to maybe even 30 range, but that's because there's a limitation, and it's like part of the issue is that above 20, staying focused is a nightmare.
And what do you think of sets of 100? Have you ever heard of that?
What the hell do the first 50 look like? Because if you've got 100 to do, how good are the first 50 going to look if you're thinking, you're just going to do them to do them? I just do not understand the point of putting your joints through that many reps and just doing reps to do them because you've got an arbitrary number you're trying to get to. The upper limit there should be how many reps can you really do without getting distracted by the fact that you're tired, without the stuff that's managing the joint getting tired so that you've lost a lot of your control, without just getting bored, without getting distracted by the buildup of lactic acid that's just making your stuff burn, as opposed to you actually being able to achieve failure in terms of your force output. Like, is it pain or is it force output that's ended up failing at that stage? And then you've got the same thing at the other end of the spectrum where you've said, like, it's probably 5 and up, right? Because it's very difficult to keep your shit under control when something is so heavy that it is under your 5 rep max. Your brain is not focused on how intensely can I contract this stuff. Your brain is focused on, can I make sure this thing doesn't kill me? Because it's really, really heavy. And maybe some of the loads that you might have to use at that rep range could end up just not, like, the amount of compression in the joint might not be suitable. How sustainable is that on a high frequency basis or a high enough frequency basis that you're going to get the outcomes that you're looking for? So, and what is the risk there, right? What is the risk that you're going to, at some stage, get stuck, have to make an adjustment to see if you can lift this thing that's really heavy, and part of that adjustment takes the joints into a position that they weren't capable of producing force in to that degree. So I think you're dead right that the logical practical limiters end up being 5 to 20 anyway, and we didn't need this research because we've already known this for decades.
Yeah.
And so if we've taken away the 2 things that apparently were the most important, there's nothing left. It is the only reason for research is to argue with bros.
Yeah. But that's pointless. No one needs to argue.
I've personally got better things to do.
Last question. Do you have any books to recommend to people when it comes even to, because people often ask me about books. I'm like, yeah, I do understand. But let's say, do you have any books around training, biomechanics, anatomy you may recommend?
I think the McMinn's Atlas of Anatomy is pretty cool. It's got a lot of cadaver diagrams in it, which is sweet because they show you kind of what this stuff actually looks like, and you're not relying on someone's sketch. And the crazy thing about, if you type some muscle things into Google, you get all sorts of different diagrams of some stuff, and they often don't show you enough different perspectives, so you can't see, well, okay, that's here, but where is that around there? And again, if you're getting to the stage where you're reading anatomy textbooks, I'm assuming you've got the basics pretty well done. There's no point getting super geeky about that stuff when we haven't even figured out the basics yet. But if someone's really looking to advance their understanding of it, that McMinn's Atlas of Anatomy is pretty cool. If it's the operations of joints and the joint function stuff, there is a series out there called Kapanji, which gets cited a lot in the RTS content. It's one of Tom's sources that he's been using again for a couple of decades now. And they're on their X revision. I think it's 5th or 6th or something of those. Isn't he French?
Oh, what's the name?
Kapanji.
Kapanji?
I think he might be.
It might exist in French.
It might exist in French.
How do you write Kapanji?
Kapandji. But so again, these are quite advanced literature.
Most trainers don't need.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shit we need to nail down first before we're bothering with reading these books. Otherwise, I think, figure out some mechanic stuff first, and then get onto the anatomy and the joint functions a little bit later. But yeah, all the books I read are business related, so I don't really.
Oh, what was the last book you read?
The last book I read was, I think it's called Your Next 5 Steps. It's like an entrepreneur book.
What's the author?
I can never remember his name because he's got I think he's like Albanian or something by heritage. So his name's a little bit trickier. He's a bit of a psycho. Like the way the guy writes the standards he runs within his company, and the way he runs his family, almost like a business, and they've got core values that they have to stick with, and check-in times and all this kind of stuff. But he's interesting. I like people that have again, this thing of structure and thought processes and principles that they operate by. I think that's something that is really beneficial, right? Nowhere in this book, this business book, does he write, this is what you must do and you will have a successful company. He goes, these are some principles that we've put in place, and we create principles. Here's some principles for creating principles. And then you use those as a means of kind of guiding you on where you need to go, but that's going to have to constantly evolve. And the way businesses and markets evolve, the people that walk in the door every week are different, right? So being adaptable, but having guiding principles, I think is a pretty good way of making sure that that's something that you can keep flowing with and be able to always be able to provide value regardless of the situation that crops up and that you're presented with.
Thank you. I'll put all your links in the YouTube description, and most importantly, the RTS one link, hopefully it will be there for friends.
Yeah.
Because I'll release the podcast next week, so it will be there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. We'll have a registration page ready in time.
Register, only 15 spots. It will be great. It will be in French. You'll be able to ask all your questions in a great gym, actually.
Yeah.
In a great gym, well equipped in prime equipment and plenty of good stuff. So yeah, thank you, Benny. And I'll see you all next week.
My pleasure, man. I really look forward to France. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.